Good morning, everyone. We are getting ready for our live for today. Willow has picked up her toy, as always. And today, my guest is going to be Siri, Vincent, Plouff, the Northern Lights Witch themselves. And I'm very excited for our chat today. We're just going to wait for Instagram to let folks know that this is happening so that then Siri can join us. And then we will get started. So, of course, the Sanctuary Hub is open. It is the weekend right now. My dye pots are on the go, of course. And we are getting ready for the Creative Coven Challenge to start on Monday. We're doing another live round. And if you join the Sanctuary Hub, then you will be able to join us for my signature challenge. And it should be a lot of fun. And then we've also got a bunch of other goodies that are in the Sanctuary Hub, of course. I actually just strained the hibiscus and raspberry shrub recipe that is in the hub, and it's quite tasty. And my rhubarb gin should be ready on Tuesday officially. There was one batch that got made in time for the hub, and then I made a second batch because it's delicious and very easy, especially when you are splitting it between friends, to drink the entire batch in one go. So we had to make an extra batch. But once Siri joins us, then we will be chatting with them about all things their definition of sanctuary. And I'm quite excited because Siri is a really incredible and very knowledgeable witch who also, here we go. Instagram going to help us behave today. Siri is a really knowledgeable witch who runs a podcast. And hello, Siri.
Hi, can
How's
you
it
hear
going?
me?
I can hear you.
Is my AC too annoying for this? Do I need to turn it off?
No, it sounds good to me. I've got fans blowing in multiple rooms, so I think we're good.
Cool.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, just kind of having a nice, relaxed Saturday morning. How about you?
Same thing here. I got my dye pots on the go this morning. Initially, I was like, "Oh, I'll take a slight break," and then I was like, "No, I'm just gonna get cocoa." So those are currently not. I was gonna say bubbling away, but like not actually bubbling away. That would be a terrible thing with wool in them.
Gross. Yeah.
And yeah, it's supposed to be like stinky hot later today, so I've got fans on the go to try and keep the house as cool as possible. And then Willow's got her pool all filled already, so she'll be able to do that because I am not taking her for a walk when it's 30 something degrees. So yeah.
Understandable. Understandable. I'm like
Uh,
trying to find a filter right now so that I don't look so dark. Sorry if my picture is just like bonkers.
nice like what sparkles, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like the
Um,
filters on a live is like a new thing. Oh, there we go. There's some fun sparkles.
yeah. Here we go. I'm just gonna have sparkles. That's just how it's gonna be.
That feels accurate, I think.
Yeah, deal with
So,
it. My
what?
immediate depth of professionalism is really, really good.
Oh, I feel like Zoom and the pandemic has just like ultimately shifted all concepts of professionalism in a way where I'm very okay with it. And if people are going to try to claim anything else, I'm going to be like, cool. And so when your Zoom meetings are happening with a bunch of like seven-figure CEOs and everybody glitches and then kids walk into the background and like recently where somebody was being interviewed on the BBC and they had like a dildo like on the bookshelf behind them and clearly had forgotten about it. And
Oh my God.
I'm like, yes,
I hope that this was an interview about Boris Johnson resigning because that would just like that would really do it for
make
me.
it so much. Yep, that would be quite for that. But also, like, I feel like they should have just like called that person back and been like, we need to talk to you right now.
Yeah. By the way,
So tell us a bit about you and what you're up to and all the things that you do, because you do all the things.
I do. I'm doing less things at the moment. But the big thing on my plate right now is that I have a book coming out with Cassandra Snow, October 1st, which is actually really in line with what we'll be talking about today. It's about tarot for self care and creativity. It's called Lessons from the Empress. You can pre order it today. Yesterday, I went to the Amazon page for like some reason. Um, and the Kindle was like 40% off. So, like if you're a Kindle reader,
Always wondered about that. Like sometimes, and I'm a terrible person, but also I'm on a budget. And there's like certain herbal books that I'll like have on my list. And then all of a sudden the Kindle version will come up for like $1 or $2. And I'm like, it's dumb for me to not purchase it right now. Like someday when I have the funds, then yes, I can like buy a proper copy of it. But like, it's not smart for me to not get this.
yeah. So, I mean, basically, authors get like a similar percentage of, whatever you, whatever format you decide to purchase it at. Last I heard, I'd have to check my contract, but ebooks actually have a much higher um like royalty rate for authors than physical books.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's because you take the production out of it, right? So like
Yeah.
more actually goes back to the publisher and therefore goes back to the author.
Yes.
So,
But also
and
like printed books myself, like I'm very like the cost of printing is often basically the difference between the ebook price and the physical book price. Like that's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
so it's it would shift the percentage. I definitely want to like dig into the like choice to sell via Amazon, because I think there's like pros and cons to both of it that I'm very curious about. Um, and I definitely want to dig into that more with you, but also not take up the whole
yes, yes, no, for sure. And I'll just say this right away. Like, I don't condone Amazon. I don't like Amazon. But I am publishing with a big publisher, so
time. Okay, they make
so
that.
I mean, it's just like pretty much anywhere that books are sold, you can make the purchase.
Well, and
So
it's one too where I'm like Amazon. I mean, Jeff Bezos is a piece of shit, and
yes,
also like this does come back to the uh, like overall conversation around accessibility and around class, and like if you have the privilege. Like I remember years ago when Andrea Gibson wrote a poem about um, like having grown up in like working class United States. And there was a line in, I can't remember which poem it was, but there was a line about, having the privilege to not shop at Walmart. And that's, Amazon has basically become the new Walmart that's like even more fucked up and toxic in terms of the like labor conditions and contract conditions and all of that. And also it takes privilege to not need to rely on finding the cheapest price for the essentials that you
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
I have so many thoughts on that. I have so many thoughts on that. Another thing that I will say about Amazon, before we get into the actual first question that we were supposed to start with, um,
like, let me go on all these tangents first.
let's just like go off. But one thing that I have a Kindle, because I'm trying to downsize like how many physical objects I own, for a whole host of reasons. Um, and it's kind of magical to have like this device that like has all of these books on it that you can just like carry with you everywhere. But if you purchase like ebooks on Kindle, yes, you're supporting Amazon, but you're not supporting their warehouse.
Oh, that's an interesting way. Okay, this makes sense because it is the warehouse that's like honestly for me the thing that is the hardest for like wrapping my brain around justification wise. And again, like it's in a lot of cases, it's not an option. And I also am like somebody who I run a small business. I don't um, have a car. So like when there's like supplies that I need, and basically my options sometimes come down to ordering from Uline or ordering from Amazon. I'm like, okay, Uline is like straight up really terrible, awful. And then Amazon gives me the option of like choosing a few other places and having it delivered directly to the house. And so it's like, okay, I think that's what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah.
and neither of them. But I think that also is. There was a really interesting post that I saw from somebody who works with Fashion Revolution in Canada, the Canadian chapter, and talking about how she'd gone to the grocery store and they had a post about how bananas, the organic bananas, were now also fair trade and the conventional bananas are not. And she went home and was researching like the banana um, production lines and like that. Yes, they are frequently involved in slave labor when they are not fair trade. And the fact that like as a consumer, yes, we have power with our dollars, and wherever possible, we want to use that power to basically vote with our dollars. And also, it shouldn't be up to us and it shouldn't be up to countries to be like, we're going to put the onus on you to spend the money and we're not going to at our much more powerful position. This is hilarious.
Sorry.
That was a
I'm paying attention to this very serious conversation, and also I realize how dark I am showing up on this. So I'm just gonna stick with the dark sparkles. That's fine. Hi.
But yeah, where it's like if we're going to have labor laws within our own country for how we expect our laborers and workers to be treated, but then like allow trade and import products where those same laws and those same rights and values are not being protected, then what are we really saying? We're basically saying like, well, we deserve this, but all the rest of you do not. And it's like it shouldn't come down to consumers who also like with inflation right now, like everybody's feeling the fucking squeeze. And so
Yeah.
it shouldn't be like there are much more powerful entities and also people and corporations who do have the power to be making better decisions and are choosing not to. And then it's like as small business owners, we're like grappling over which terrible corporation to source some of our supplies for because we've made decisions elsewhere where the price point is like not able to be shrunk down because we're like, this is where we can control things. I can't control how my glass jars are manufactured, but I can control where I've sourced, my herbs and my beeswax and things like that.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I feel that.
So after tangent, what's your definition of sanctuary? I'm so excited for your book, by the way. That's just like
Yay.
exactly where my brain and I for the last like couple of years. So I'm very excited for it.
Yay! I'm also, Cassandra and I are also very excited for it. We actually met yesterday. We're trying to pull together a little mini like book tour here in the Midwest, and doing some online stuff and figuring out what podcasts we want to try to be guests on. And yeah, we're in that like, we have 3 months until this book is out in the world, which is wild because October 1st seems a lifetime away right now. Oh my God, this cat is just like, so wow. Yes, October 1st seems a lifetime away. And yet we're in that 3-month heavy promo period.
Crazy. So now one thing that I'm super curious about is like right now with the book publishing industry, everything is super fucking delayed, which is part of why I created the Sanctuary Hub because I was like, okay, I can't just like put pre-orders on the website and 8 weeks later have the book sent to people. Like we're looking at minimum 6 months and I actually live an hour away. So it truly is like once they have the paper and can print it, then I can go and pick it up and I'm not dealing with customs.
Yes.
Most other especially indie publishers, I'm seeing are printing like overseas in China. So then they're dealing with delays plus then all of the customs delays and shipping delays. And so you're working with a big publisher. When did the book go on pre-order? How has that whole kind of process been? Like, how long have you guys been working on the book?
The book has been on pre-order since like probably April, I would guess.
So like a 6 month time frame.
Um, yeah. I don't fully remember. I believe it was available for pre-order in some places before we actually had the cover.
Okay.
But I might be lying about that. But basically, once you have the cover, like you're able to go to pre-order because there's actually an image that you can sell. And that's when you can really hit the ground running with like encouraging people to pre-order. Again, like that last 3 months before the book is actually released are really, really critical for pre-orders. Another thing that like obviously with an indie publisher and like publishing your own work, pre-orders are really essential because it's like, okay, I know that I now have the money to physically print at least this many copies.
All right, that is
And
where it's like you need to put down like $10,000 and you're like, I have to know that like there's at least enough pre-orders to cover that deposit. Like,
yup. Yeah. So there's that. And then also like in general, whether you're independent publishing or, publishing with an actual publisher, pre-orders determine demand for the
yes.
book.
Yeah.
Another special thing, I don't know how this works with indie publishers, but for like a larger publishing company, and I mean, we're publishing through Wiser, which isn't like a huge publishing company, but it is considered one of the quote unquote big two in occult publishing. So like it's still a
Okay.
small publisher, but it's considered like one of the bigger occult publishers. But pre-orders determine your availability or like they determine your first day sales. So all of your like first day sales are really, really important in the publishing industry to prove that your book is like, very wanted and there's a high demand for your book. And all pre-orders are included in that first day. So it has a really strong like ability to get you on bestseller lists or yeah. So
That's
like
a lot of,
pre-ordering is really important. If you know you're going to buy the book anyway,
you should pre-order.
and you're not, just pre-order it. Yeah. I'm sorry, my cat is throwing a conniption. I have to let her out.
That's
Winnie, you little monster.
Our fur babies are just,
She has been on another level all fucking morning. So
I know they're happening and I want all of the attention. So
yes. She's been like trying to push over the TV this morning. That's her new fun way to be bad. So
this is the thing
yeah.
with like Willow's version of getting attention is like, let me just put my body in between you and whatever the fuck is happening.
Yeah.
Also, she's currently on the other couch with her head on a pillow and her toy in between her feet because she's like, here we go again. It's been a week of this shit. I know that this is for the next day, so I guess I'll just stay over here. She was also chewing her nail earlier because she's a nail biter.
Our animals, man, our animals. Yeah.
So, okay, so this is totally fascinating. And so you and Cassandra co-wrote it.
Yes.
You guys get connected with Wiser? Did they approach you? Did you guys approach them? How did you on the topic as well?
So it actually was born out of a workshop that we taught last summer together. So a series that I kind of did for the pandemic, I skipped this year. We're still in a pandemic and I didn't do the series this year. but it was this kind of like Weird Times, WYRD Times, like workshop series. The first
Okay.
year I did self-care for Weird Times with astrologer and owner of the future, Lacey Purpich Headkey. She's based here in Minneapolis with me. And we did it all online. And then the second year, it was creating in Weird Times. So it was Cassandra and I basically pulling together like I think it was like a 6-class workshop on using tarot for creativity and like in really like difficult times. And basically like your creativity is sacred, you know, the tarot is sacred. Like you can use all of these to fuel whatever your form of creativity is. So throughout the book, I think this is really special about the book actually. Like we don't limit what creativity means to whoever is reading the book. So like it's not just like tarot for writers or tarot for like fine artists or tarot for theater, all of which are things that we could have written. But it gives like a lot of different creative prompts that are good for a variety of creatives. Yes. So that's something that I'm really proud of and excited about. So basically as we were writing the workbook for this workshop series, this course, I texted Cassandra and I was like, this is a book, isn't it? And Cassandra was like, yes, it absolutely is. And so I think it was like the book before we brought it to Wiser was probably like, I'm just going to throw this number out there. It was probably already like 35,000 words, right? So like well on its way to being book length. Yeah. And when we pitched Wiser, we pitched them because frankly, Cassandra has published with them before. So
well, and they
were already
like talked to a cult. And when I started following them at one point, I think because of Snort and Cackle, but then oh my God, half of my witch books have actually been published by them and I hadn't even realized it.
Yeah. So Cassandra wrote Queering the Tarot and Queering Your Craft.
Yes.
Previously with Wiser.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. So really natural, like, okay, if Wiser doesn't pick this up, then maybe we can shop it around to other publishers, but that's the obvious step. We pitched it, they liked it. We had 3 months to finish the book. And because they wanted to publish it this year and we pitched it last year.
Okay.
So
yes. Yeah. And then you need that pre-order time. That's like, get it done. Yeah. Let's get it out there.
Yeah. Well,
that's wild. What was,
yeah. During pre-orders was also when we were doing like our conceptual edits and not our conceptual edits. Those were probably like pre-orders, but then that's also when we were doing our, you know, our line edits and our final copy edits once the design came through. And the book is beautiful. It is gorgeous. So I'm very excited to actually get my physical paws on a copy of it because like every chapter has these beautiful like floral drop caps and like it's just laid out so beautifully. So I'm very excited to have it in hand. Yeah, but that was all happening like during the pre-order period. So yeah, we had like we basically finished it last fall.
So do you know whether like, because if the pre-order period, I mean, right now what we're being told from the publishing or the print houses is that you need a minimum of 6 months for the literal paper that they're printing it on to arrive in time. I'm assuming that the bigger publishers probably have just like stock on order that then they decide how they want to be like distributing accordingly. So probably they're just like using the same stock and then printing different things on it so they don't necessarily have to worry about that. Okay.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I don't fully know how the printing process works. Thankfully, that is one of the things that I don't need to worry about.
Somebody else can do.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, I don't know if it means that our print runs will be smaller than they normally would be. That may be true. We had a pretty low or a tight word count limit, I should say.
okay.
Um, which I don't know if that was also because of printing issues, but it may also mean, there's more time in between print editions.
Yes.
Um, so like if we just run out of stock, then it might take longer to print more. I'm not totally sure how it works.
What was it like working with, because I'm assuming you guys like you had an editor. How much control do you feel like you and Cassandra maintained on the project compared to like have, especially where you like built a workshop around it and had kind of pre-created it. And then now you've got this third party who's very invested in the project coming in and like probably has a different viewpoint. Like how does it feel like the way that it has grown into its current final form was the direction or similar to how you think it would have if you didn't have that extra input?
Um, it was such a whirlwind. I haven't even really like had time to think through that question, right?
Fair
I
enough.
think
Yep.
we were both just yeah, I think we were both just very eager to like get it out in the world at like a larger distribution rate. Um, and I also do think that the publisher wanted a little bit more emphasis on self-care than we had initially put in the book, which we thought a book on creativity can and should stand on its own. Like it doesn't necessarily need to have like another angle because we
True.
had and have a lot to say about creativity. Um, I think that the self care edition um, is going to help people who like I like, hey, yes, I have, all of these different reasons to pick up this book. It's about creativity and it's about self care. And I think ultimately we both see creativity as an aspect of self care because creativity is so essential for um, your self expression. And self expression is really an important aspect of self care because it's once you becomes a lot easier or once you kind of like dive into that process of knowing yourself, self-expression becomes like an integral part of your sense of self, I guess. So I
Yeah.
think that creativity and self-care really, and also I mean just like genuinely if like you are a very anxious person and just need to color, like that is also creativity, or
Yes.
knitting, actually. I mean, this is sunflower knit. So, like knitting as self care, even if you're not designing your own patterns, you're choosing the yarn, you are determining what pattern you want to follow, what will fit into your style or the style of whoever you're like gifting this item to. And all of that is creativity for self-care. Like for me, like knitting helps me clear my mind, or give me something to do with my hands while I'm, you know, like watching something. It like there's something about that like two sides of your body movement that is very soothing.
Yes.
And it's very creative.
Yes. Well, and it's also very it it literally keeps the monkey part of our brain engaged so that then you can actually focus. Like the number of knitters that I know a lot of folks, and I count myself amongst these folks, where like I learned how to knit as a kid, but I picked it up again as an 18-year-old, mostly to deal with my social anxiety, so that I had something
Yeah.
to hands in social situations. And it has continued to be that for me. It's interesting as I've like you know, sort of built a different relationship with my anxiety, I have been able to not rely on it in social situations, but it still remains like a pretty solid tool for that. And especially in like very stressful situations. Um, but it's also something where like the number of knitters that I know who have to navigate being in like traditional workplaces and explaining like and I definitely experienced this where like I when I was in university I'd be knitting in lectures, and if a prof didn't know me then it could be distracting for them initially, um, but then they realized, oh, this is like I'm very engaged in your class, and if I'm not knitting then it's a problem. And so generally that
Yeah.
worked okay. I definitely have experienced times where like somebody who is not the regular lecturer would come in and be distracted because my hands were moving. And they didn't know, like it was for them a distraction. And so they needed me to stop. I was like, cool, that's fine. Understood. I'm not going to pay as much attention. I can just tell you that now. But in workplaces, it's often seen as like disrespectful to be doing like visually be doing something else in front of somebody else. And I'm like, this is like the, I mean, I think of kids in schools with fidget spinners. I'm like, this is literally how this child is focusing right now because that mechanical part of their brain is engaged so that the other parts of their brain that need to be focusing and like taking in the information, processing it, and retaining it are able to function without distraction. And they work as two different things. Like I definitely have my social knitting projects versus my not social knitting projects in terms of how much do I be actually paying attention to the stitches. But it's the same way for people who are doodling, same for folks who are, you know, just like writing down random stuff. Like it's whenever I'm teaching, especially when I'm teaching kids, because as adults, I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you know that you have permission, but also generally with adults, I'm teaching them in creative spaces anyway. And so they already, like, we're already kind of building that in. But when I'm teaching kids, I find that they often, especially because they're in traditional school, um, like environments, that they have to be taught or given permission to be doing something else if they need to. And so I'll say, you know, when I get up in front of kids, like, look, I'm going to be talking about this thing. If you need to be drawing or doing something else while I'm talking in order to focus better, feel free. I'm not going to get mad at you. And in fact, here's a creative, you know, drawing thing that you can do that's related to what we're going to do. And then at the end of class or at the end of what I'm talking, then you can come and show me what you're working on. And so it gives
Yeah.
them a structure in case they need it. But often, you know, they've never been given that opportunity. And so it makes it harder for them to focus in class. And then you give them that thing, and they are just so much more engaged in whatever you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we kind of underestimate the level to which creativity um, is something that everybody has access to within them, right? I mean, I think that especially under capitalism, right? And I live in the US, you live in Canada, like here in the US, it's like, oh, you better monetize that. Are you planning on becoming a professional
Yes.
painter someday? Then like, why are you taking this art class? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
no, like it's not essential that your creativity be in service of like someone else, your career, whatever. I think creativity is just something that we do as human beings, um, that makes us who we are and that makes us special. And so that's like a huge part of why writing about creativity is um, really important to me, and to Cassandra as well. I mean, we're very much like of one mind about that.
That you had to go through. I mean, I'm trying to think of like Samson and I, when we make our books together, it works well because we bring very different skill sets to it, right? Like I can do photography. I've had to train myself to do photography because of running my business. But part of why I've had to learn it is because he normally lives 3,000 miles away from me. So it's like when we're able to do bigger book projects together, it's like, okay, we're coming together, we are pooling our skills, but like I'm still very much directing the overall like what are we doing, and then he brings his skill set into it and brings his literal lens and metaphorical lens into it. Um, but we're not having to like, figure out, okay, how are we co-creating and co-writing and trying to like write in the same voice as well, where there's one
Yeah.
cohesive voice through the storyline. That skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. So the joys of collaboration, the joys of creativity and working on things together. I think, Cassandra has been really essential to this process, obviously, as like one half of the creative brain for this process, but also like they understand how this is their third book. So they understand at this point the rhythm of like, okay, so this is when we're going to have this meeting. Oh, that meeting is probably not important. That can be an email. Like, um, whereas I'm very like, the pre-orders hit and I was like, okay, we should set up a meeting with the marketing team. And Cassandra was like, seems a little early. And I was like, what?
I totally would be the same as you, where it's like, okay, this is like we've shifted to a new thing, so now we have to do all of this work. And I'm also very much like there's just so much fire in my chart. I'm like, I make a decision, and then I'm like, it needed to have been done yesterday. Like, and meanwhile,
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
multi months worth of work ahead of me. I'm like, why isn't it already done?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, no, because it's not possible that it is already done.
But that doesn't change the fact that I want it to be done in my bones.
Right.
So how? What's your definition of sanctuary? I've realized that I was like, oh yeah, we're like 35 minutes in and we still haven't actually answered the question. So we have a really,
Yes.
but I think,
Oh, well.
what
Oh,
is,
well. So, my definition of sanctuary is very place based, actually. Like, a sanctuary is a place that I can go to find peace and be myself. And sanctuary in this very specific moment for me also feels like a place that does not have expectations on me. Um, like I think that that is really important. I'm currently in burnout recovery, like healing from burnout stuff. So determining like, oh, it's okay to have like moments of your life where there are no expectations. Okay. Like, what does that mean?
very
So
much,
yeah, yeah. So that is really important to me. And I think sanctuary, when I think about witchcraft things, I think about, home altars, space clearing. I think about working with house spirits to make your home feel safer and better. I think about warding and protective magic just to make sure that, like you're safe in your sanctuary. But I also like some really simple images just come to mind. Like I just like, like a beautiful like crystal tower or whatever, like a little like crystal point that can stand up or like a rose quartz like face mask that you could like keep in the freezer and then like come out and do a nice little thing. That's like really bougie of me to say that. But I want one so badly.
all of the rose quartz. I have this giant chunk of rose quartz that sits in the corner of my bathroom, of my shower, because I'm like, this is also shower portals are just magic to begin with. So it's like, you just need to live here.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of what sanctuary means to me. And I think that once you have established a sanctuary, it's easier to carry it with you. Like you can have like that inner sanctuary that you can go to for your self-care when you're like at work or out in the greater world. But yeah, for me, like sanctuary feels very like place-based and home-based. It might be because I'm a Cancer. Now that I'm thinking about it.
A little.
Yes, like I need my little shell and I can take it with me and that's great, but I need my shell.
So, what tools do you have and are kind of like your go-to in terms of building sanctuary and maintaining?
Um, okay, here's my thing. Bath teas. Just like herbs,
Yes.
baths. My partner and I, my spouse understands that I will never live in an apartment that does not have a bathtub.
Yep.
That is not for me. I've never been that person.
So funny that you say that, because I've literally been like, so my house, I will eventually need to move out of my house just because there's not enough land. Um, and I like land, I need more gardening space where Willow isn't going to just step on everything. Um, but like that's, further in the future. And so in between, it's like there's renovations that I kind of like mentally dream about. And one of those is to create a master with an ensuite on the second floor as part of like a slightly larger upstairs renovation. And one of the things that I'm having a really hard time with is because there's already a really good bathroom up there that I don't think really needs to be touched. But if you're going to create a master ensuite situation, like it's still not a massive house where you could easily have like two very large bathrooms with like nice big bathtubs. And so part of me is like, okay, I guess then the master ensuite could just have like a really nice shower with like a good shower head and like nice space that's like also big enough that you're not just like kind of whacking against the walls. However, I personally don't want a master ensuite that does not have a nice big soaker tub for when I'm stressed out to sit with my own bath teas. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, then do you even renovation, which is mildly ridiculous. But I'm also like, the whole point of the master and the master, like, whether it's a whole wing in a house or it's literally just like the master bedroom with its ensuite, the point of it is to be a refuge and for you to be able to like scoot away from the rest of life, including your children and your fur babies and everybody else, and be like, I am escaping in here, I am closing the door, and nobody gets to come in other than me. And if the
Yes.
bathtub, then what's the point?
Yes, exactly. So this is actually really funny because I am hopefully soon to be launching my own bath tea
Mm,
um, in my apothecary. So the apothecary is something I tried last year. It's winding down. I have decided that I only want to sell herbal products that I make myself.
mm,
Um, so I don't have any herbal products online right now because I have just been very casual about it. I haven't been trying to push it. I'm thinking of it more as like I would be making these things anyway, so I might as well sell them in the shop, right? So like I'm trying not to put very much pressure on this project. But one of those things is what I call my Nordic Seas bath tea,
mm.
which is filled with herbs that are native to Scandinavia and that have really good like skin, nervous system, just like really soothing qualities, and sea salt.
Yes.
So that will be coming at some point. I every time I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a huge batch of this and I'm gonna get it all packaged. Um, I
You
run
just use,
out of two herbs because
yeah,
like this thing has like nine herbs in it, right? So
yeah.
like keeping track of like how many I need at any given time is kind of hysterical.
This is
Um,
like ongoing experience with my herbal products. They are like by far the best profit margin situation because like even if you're using really beautiful, like perfectly sourced herbs, like it just is significantly cheaper than my naturally dyed Canadian sourced yarn. Like it is just
yes,
labor wise, I'm like, okay, I can make one sweater's lot of wool out of, many, many hours of the various stages. Or I can make one batch of joint salve and have, like, even my small batches, in the course of a day, I can have, 40 jars by the end of it. And so
yeah,
this is exponentially easier, significantly easier on my body. And so obviously I don't want to not be selling them because I also enjoy making them. Similar to you, I'm like, oh, I need this thing, so I'll just like make a bigger batch of it. But perpetually running out of like one or two things, and then you're like, oh fuck, now what do I do? Like my tea blends are kind of notorious for that. The other salves, my salve things, I'm like, okay, I know these ingredients so well at this point, and I generally have a pretty decent staff of them. But I feel like
Yeah,
every I get a wholesale order to make herbal products, half of the order ends up like half of the income from the order ends up going to restock supplies for it. It's just because that's the timing of it, you know. But it's
right.
like, am I always needing to spend so much money on like rebuying my herbs because I've run out of the herbs?
Right.
And they
Yeah.
never all run out
So
at the same time, but they're integral.
so I just grabbed this because it's actually really close to me. So I'm going to be launching 3 herbal products. One is that bath tea that I mentioned. The other is my Winter's Kiss lip balm, which is actually formulated. I can't say this on any of the packaging for FDA related reasons, but it's formulated to heal cracked lips and cold sores and basically like the things that plague your lips during the winter. Um, and I have those all like packaged and ready to go. And also, I have a skull soother, which I'm a person who suffers from chronic headaches. I did not realize until probably within the last couple of years that it's not normal not to have a headache every day, or it's not normal to have a
Oh,
headache every day. Yeah,
oh my
I
God.
just like assumed that this is how human beings lived and that like our heads just started aching by the end of the day every day. So,
Oh no. In my family, like you get a headache, we don't get headaches. And so it's literally like you're going and checking for brain tumors. Like that's how extreme it is in my family
oh
for us
god.
to get.
Yeah.
I can't.
So, yeah, it sucks. My last July I had 14 migraines.
Whoa, whoa.
It
That's
was
like how
horrifying.
at that point. Like it's just one perpetual migraine.
Yeah. No, it's really bad. I might have like a day of relief in between migraines and then like boom. So the skull soother salve, while it will not cure your migraines, if you have that many migraines, please seek medical attention. You should not be relying on an external herbal product. But it is formulated and it helps me a lot in my day-to-day life. And I don't have the correct size of labels for it. So here it is. They're in these cute little like matte rose gold packages. There you go. They'll be
Adorable.
coming soon. I literally just need to
Amazing.
order the labels and then they'll go up on the website.
That's right. It's always like I literally was counting out the bags, like the empty tea bags that I'm gonna be prepping for this massive festival that I like hit the ground running for August through September, and I'm just like all of the stock right now I am dealing with because it needs to be inventoried and shipped in about three
Yes.
weeks. Um, and so literally like inventorying everything and figuring out like what the fuck do I need to be finishing making. And so I've got the physical tea bags and some of the labels, and I'm realizing, oh, I need to print more labels before I can actually mix up the tea blends to that because like especially with tea, like you want those labels put on while the bag is still flat. Good luck
Yeah.
getting it to look nice and lined up and sitting properly if you put it on after the fact. So I'm just like, oh my god, like the the steps can be quite annoying. I can deal with like the jars whenever it's jars, like you can make the batch, just like store them somewhere, put a label on the general storage of like this is what's in so that you at least remember what salve is in which stuff. But
Yeah.
you have to.
Yeah. It's a part of my rhythm that I haven't quite figured out yet, which is why none of them are on my website. None of them have officially launched. It's fine. Um,
That's
so
uh,
yeah.
you also you're a Nordic witch practicing like the things that you do are for me like as somebody with Scottish ancestry and then also Slavic ancestry. The practices are actually like there's certainly overlap, but there are some like quite specific differences with Nordic witchcraft, and I'm thinking quite particularly about troll magic and then runes. Um,
Yeah.
of which, like generally, Nordic witchcraft, I think, has unfortunately been co opted also by Nazis. And so you do quite a bit of work trying, like, helping people to find the resources to figure out, like, what are legitimate ways, like, legitimate sources for learning this if you want to be learning it versus, like, what's been co opted and, like, what are some of the dog whistles to be looking out for and stuff like that. Um, but what of because I'm myself fairly unfamiliar with both ruins as well as troll magic. What's something that's like kind of fun from either or both that also is like related to sanctuary?
Ooh. Um, well, Trildome is really like a lot of folk magic remedies um, and rituals. And I think that as with any kind of comprehensive folk magic system, like there's a lot of ways that it can be utilized and used. This is like not actually magical, but because I'm thinking so much of that like cancer crab shell sort of definition of sanctuary, like I love having folk textiles around.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like I love having like the Scandinavian knitwear or the like, you know, Swedish dish towels or like whatever it is. Rose malling, like the Norwegian like um kind of floral, like very distinctive floral painting style. Like I have a piece of that at home and I absolutely adore it. It's on my ancestor altar. Um and it's interesting too because in Troll Dome, like each of those like symbols might have a meaning. So like stars are often used for protection,
Okay. Yes.
or like crosses are also often used for protection. I'd have to like really go through and just like look at a textile and be like, oh yeah, like this is, you know, all of this stuff. So it kind of like infuses with a little bit of that like cultural background knowledge when you have those things around. And I'm sure that in um certainly Slavic and Scottish history, there's also like a lot of just symbols in the folk art.
Yeah, I mean, like as somebody who works in textile world, like it's actually totally fascinating to see the overlap of not only the symbols themselves, but also the meaning
Yep.
across. Like it's like somebody I know, one of my colleagues is Maori and does a lot of pattern work related to Maori symbology. And as I've been digging into my own Slavic and Scottish Celtic uh, stuff, like the pagan symbology is extremely similar, and also very much ends up being related to the same things and then for the same purposes. Like this symbol is a protective rune across cultures, across the globe, like pre a point where we would be able to say definitively this was brought from here to here to here. And
Yes.
so interesting. And it's also really interesting that you bring up the protective symbols and symbology on textiles because that's something that like we're about 2 books away from it at this point. But one of my things is that I've already started digging into the protective, in particular, symbology of my ancestral backgrounds and starting to
Ooh.
then be making knitwear patterns with those protective symbols designed into them. And I'm very excited about it. It's in like it's probably about 5 years away from being prepped and ready for the world, mostly because there's just more research time that I need to be doing at this point in order to kind of get to the stage where then I can get into the creation aspect of it, which is about a 2 year project in and of itself is the creation. Um, but yeah, it's textiles are totally, and it makes me think of like how we've used pattern work across the board, like in Poland, one of the traditions pre-Christianity was to be painting protective symbols on your window frames and on your door frames. And, in Iceland, for example, which also was something in Poland, again, pre-Christianity, and also in Scotland, you would create protective symbols in the dirt floors of your homes. And in rural
Yep.
areas, it took longer for, like wooden floorboards to be put down. And they had dirt floors for a longer period of time, then that tradition lasted for a longer period of time. And it's just so fascinating to me about, like, again, as somebody who's like fiber witch and like fusing both like slow fashion and also witchcraft to be adorning your body with these protective motifs. And then it also makes me think of like with tattoos. And, that's another
Yes.
is like researching the runes and protective symbols so that eventually I can be tattooing them onto my body so that they are a more permanent uh, protection thing. But yeah, that's quite fun.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very much like these are things that I, have around. They're not necessarily, I do sometimes enchant objects and just like have them in the home, and like that is an aspect of it. I wouldn't say that that is necessarily super um, specific to Trolldom or any kind of like Nordic magic. Runes you can also create into something called bind runes. So this is basically if you've ever crafted a sigil.
Yes.
Um, a bind rune is basically just like crafting a sigil, but only using runes. And then the meanings that you ascribe to these runes are what um, what gets like imbued into this bind rune. So the most traditional way of crafting a bind rune is just to have three runes. Just choose three because depending on what runic alphabet you are working with, there are as many as 32 and as few as 16 runes.
Okay.
So you don't have as big of a like, you're not going to use all of them because that
Yeah.
would just be chaotic, right? You're
Yeah.
going to like try to limit yourself down. So that's another thing that you can do. I actually don't really work with bind runes too much. I should. I would like to, especially if I ever got into a place of like, making crafts for people, uh, like art imbued like magical art or anything like that, which is probably not going to happen, frankly, because I'm much more focused on the writing side of things.
Oh, that's so fun though. And it also, I mean, yeah, I'm immediately thinking of like if you were to try and create a sigil out of basically using the entire major arcana, like that pure chaos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you want to choose like very specific symbols from tarot or whatever you're using to, get the intended desired effect. So that's another thing that you can do. You could really easily cross stitch, for example, a bind rune on like a kitchen towel. This would be like a very simple spell, but a spell to always give you the energy to do your dishes.
Yes. Oh,
Um,
that,
I've been like trying to scale down my like magic, not scale down, but like just in healing from burnout, I'm trying to like find little ways of bringing more energy into my life because, like I don't personally feel like I have a ton of energy right now to hex the patriarchy as much as I want to.
that,
That's
yeah.
a tall order, and when I do it, I want to make sure that I'm like solid and that I'm contributing something rather than just like adding to the sense of chaos.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a really good point. Like, I think that especially when we are in like activist circles, then there can be a lot of, and I think, like, I think people are trying to combat this concept, but it is still like, when people are burnt out, then it's very easy to slip into scarcity mindset, and scarcity mindset then breeds like basically resentment of anybody who's not burnt out, if we're being honest. Uh, and so we're like constantly battling this like weird shame around getting to a point where we are like stable and able to be like thinking from like a cohesive, healthy position. And it's very bizarre where it's almost like we wear burnout as a badge. And as somebody who
Yeah.
also like, been trying to recover from burnout, not really like I've gotten back from being like so burnt out that I'm about to cry every, you know, moment of the day. But I'm not so fully out of it that I'm not still like I'm on the healthier version of the cusp, but the cusp is not that far away. Uh, and
Yes.
and I also like I don't wear it as a badge the way that I used to when I was younger. Now I'm like I don't actually enjoy being like this. I do recognize that I need to be putting better systems in place to better support me so that I don't get to this point because it's not a functional space. It doesn't make me create my best work. It doesn't make me the best person to be in the lives of, the people that I care about or the greater world. Um, but I think we still are in this like weird battle that shouldn't be and doesn't need to be a battle of uh, like being okay with not being burned out so that we can be of better service, and recognizing that when we are at burnout point or when we are at risk of getting to burnout point, that actually the most important thing is to stop and recalibrate and rest and do what we need to get back to like better than functioning, like not just like survival mode, but like into thriving mode where we can, be rested and be like balanced and then be able to navigate, also to be more creative so that then regardless of what comes at us, that we can think of it with creativity and curiosity and figure out like how can we best address this situation in a way that is also causing the least harm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like something that um mm, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So, I have been trying to figure out how to get more involved in activism. For me, activism is also a very local thing, right? Like, I want to be involved very specifically with people. And as you know, the conversation in the US is very much around like, get off digital. Like, you want to be having these conversations where they cannot be surveilled as
Oh,
easily.
oh, I didn't even think of that. That's fucking creepy.
Yeah, it's fucking creepy. But I'm moving in a year. So,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
do
So,
I want to be putting down roots and getting involved in this network here when I should maybe just be resting and like connecting people with where they maybe want to be? Because like I'm moving to Jersey City next August. So,
yeah.
like,
So
I don't
it's,
know what my life is going to be like there, and I want to be involved in activism there, but I'm going to need to learn how to do that because it's very different than where I currently live. Um, so yeah, so I think about that a lot. I think about like getting off of digital and creating these more communities. I think that where I tend to be more is in the care work side of activism. So like a very good example of kind of what I'm talking about is, you know, during the Montgomery bus boycotts, right? You had the people who were on strike and people who were not utilizing the bus, but like people still had to get to work. They still needed to get to where they're going. So there became these like transportation assistance systems that like would help people get to where they're going. And I want to be more so the person who is in the transportation assistance, right? Or like, also very famously during the AIDS epidemic, in the early um in
80s.
the early like 80s, early 90s and in 80s.
Yeah.
Like it was very common for, especially for some reason, bisexual women um to take on a lot of roles in caretaking for well, not even elder, for gay men who were dying of AIDS, because they were women, and so like they were like allowed into different spaces than their male partners were allowed.
Oh, that's
um
really, and also makes sense where it's like there's the connection to the, like you're part of the queer community, but because of the fact that you're a woman, then you're being allowed into spaces that, and you're also being accepted as being seen as a caregiver in a way where you can like fly under the radar or be able to navigate spaces while still like being able to provide that like safety of your community being provided with that support.
yeah, so like, and that's what more so like where I see myself then in like the um you know front lines of like protests or getting arrested or anything like that. And I mean, a huge part of that is because I'm disabled too. Like I just, like risking arrest is something I could do in my early 20s. It is less something that I can do now when, I can't necessarily be separated from my medication for that long. And stuff like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Privilege in being able to put yourself in a position where you can be arrested and have it not, and like race is absolutely part of it. I think in particular in the States these days we're seeing, but also there's like a lot of other factors that go into it as well. And like access to medication, if you have an accessibility aid, like if you're in a wheelchair, like there's a lot of things where it's not just like, can you physically get to the parade and or get to the protest and be there, but it's also like, okay, once you're there, being in the position of like putting yourself between the protesters and the police, especially in the States, and then like in the event that, things go sideways and people start getting arrested, can you actually afford, which also is part of it too, like in the States with the bail system, like can
Oh
you
God.
actually afford to be arrested and then to be bailed out in a like a reasonable time frame where you're not like potentially looking at spending weeks or months in jail and having to
Yeah.
like feast on
Yeah. And I mean, thankfully there are bailout networks, although they're definitely strained. Um,
yep,
you
yeah,
know,
totally.
so there's just a lot that goes into it. But I think that like I'm just in this really weird place where I want to be a caregiver for the activists in my life, who are more so on the front lines or who are, doing that stuff. But I'm trying to get myself to a better resourced position in which I can, donate funding, because right now I just can't.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and also, like, for a while, like during the riots here in Minneapolis, I volunteered to drive people. Like if they needed to GTFO of a protest, like I would like come and get them and stuff. And that felt like a really good role because it was still supporting and also like, I was the getaway car basically.
Yeah, it's um such an interesting like balance to be finding. And then I think also like complicating that is, especially when you are running a small business and so you have a more active and consistent um, uh, like presence on social media, whereas like normal people can be like, okay, I'm cool, I'm piecing out on social media for a chunk of time, but like if you are at all reliant on social media for business, whether it's because you're an influencer or you run a small business or you are an activist who primarily like does work via social media, like through signal sharing and stuff like that, then there ends up being this also like extra pressure for you to be doing things that are then visible to others, and that there's like there like the of activism part of it is absolutely a factor, but then there's also this pressure to like be doing things that are very visible. And I think part of that is fair in terms of transparency, but there's also part of it where it's like, as a small business, I shouldn't necessarily need to show you the, receipt of how much money I have sent to this organization for, like for me, I send monthly donations and I don't put up because I'm also like, it's not actually your business about how much money I am giving on a monthly basis because it's directly related to how much money my business is making. I am
Yeah.
to give a donation every month, and that's my choice and where the money is going. Like that's, and I'm very open about it. I make a point of posting on the website and on my newsletter like this is where the money is going this month, but like how much is going, I think we've like the and part of it is because there are also people who like are frauds and like they fake it, and so then it puts extra pressure to be like doing things in this way. But then I think it also becomes a problem because we then discount all of the activism work that is not able to be or as easy to put online in like a quick little snapshot of like, look, I'm doing this thing. And also when you're like, look, I'm doing
Yeah.
this thing, I also have a problem with it when it's like, okay, but are you posting it to like prove a thing or to like be accountable, or are you doing it so that it like makes you look like you're like a good activist too? Like as somebody who's been within activist circles for way fucking longer than social media has been kicking around, I know that I'm like, this is not actually the way that like as an activist we do the fucking work. And I think that there's a lot of value to social media for activism. I think there's a lot of ways that grassroots organizations and grassroots activists can like harness social media and use it for good. And also I am like highly suspicious of any individual who makes a point of like posting a thing without also like being able to truly back it up with like you're going and doing the work, and or like I've seen you go to stuff and be active and be part of the community outside of social media. If you're using social media and like posting and being like, look, I'm at this thing, and I'm like, okay, cool, and also I know that you do this all of this other stuff, then that's great. But if you're like making a point of every single event, you make a point of going to really public events and then posting about being at that public event, and then you're not also doing other work, then I'm like, okay, what's the purpose of this? Like there's if you want to be signal boosting, you can also actually just signal boost the information for the event and not put your face in the middle.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've landed actually with a lot of what I share to my business social media. Like, because first of all, I live in fucking Minneapolis, and like I've done some like, you know, like gone to like circles about prison abolition and stuff like that. Like, do I want like an image of me to be easily searchable by the Minneapolis Police Department? Fuck no, I don't. Um, and also, it's really so. I had this experience with someone who is I'm like rolling my eyes a lot. As you can tell, I'm going to be a little snarky about this. But there was somebody who lives not in the Minneapolis St. Paul metropolitan area who is a famous like influencer in the witchcraft sphere on TikTok, um, who came in and brought supplies to George Floyd Square. And that's great. But they took a selfie and they made a TikTok, and then everybody was like, oh my God, you're so cool. You actually do the work. And
But nope.
yeah, I know, right?
Oh yeah.
And like, it's like, oh, well, thanks for dropping off supplies this one day. And like, you did a good thing. Like, I'm not gonna be one to say that I've done a ton of volunteering around George Floyd Square. I definitely haven't done a lot of. I because of my disability have not been as active as I wanted to be, and because of the pandemic, I haven't understood my role in everything. So like, I'm not gonna say that I've done a ton of activism,
No,
but
like you can if you like if your actual goal is using your platform to raise awareness about like, look, these are things that are needed at George Floyd Square, then fucking like take a like you can take a TikTok of the like things that they are asking for, or like putting things into a box that does not have your face involved in the middle of it and being like, hey, heads up, like these are things that these folks are asking for. This is the drop off place or the mailing address. This is where you
yes,
can, like, there are ways to utilize your platform to do activism work that is not centering you as like, you know, a better person, or like as like something that should be like, fawned upon for doing what are basics, and also is like often
right.
like the hard heavy lifting of doing the work.
Right. Like, I didn't post that I was a getaway driver for fucking like protests during the riots,
I mean,
like online.
a decision on your part for your own safety, but
Right. But like, I was engaged in the local signal chat or whatever of like people who were able to do this and like paying attention to what the protests were doing. Like, I didn't like, I have friends who delivered ice to George Floyd Square because it gets fucking hot in Minneapolis in the summer.
yeah,
And so they were like basically providing like life-saving ice, like for people who were either living in the square or to local, like, they're really large uh houseless encampments
yeah.
in Minneapolis in the summer. So they'll, like deliver supplies to them. They were fucking posting on social media. They were just doing it. And here's the thing is that when you're doing the work, like, if I'm doing the work, I don't have the spoons to make sure that I look cute, that I
Yeah.
like,
Oh my God,
that I have the right catchy caption, that I, like all of that shit. I'm just like, oh, I have time. I can go get ice. Here we go. Like,
it's like when people show up to like disaster relief things and they're like wearing really nice clothes and high heels, and it's like that is not fucking practical. Like, where are your steel toe boots? Why are you like, you need the clothes that it doesn't matter when they get grimy. Like, you literally need to not be thinking of those things and having them in the back of your mind. You need to just be like resourced in a way where it allows you to do the work and allows you to like be not in the way of everybody else who's also trying to do. And like, I mean, I
right.
say this, and I also recognize for a lot, this is somehow new to them. I don't actually want to give that much grace to people because I'm like, the world has been fucked up for a really long time. I have been, like running in circles doing this shit that we've been fighting for now as well for my entire adult life. I also want to recognize that for a lot of folks, there's been, for various types of privilege, and also the role of social media is part of it, where our access to information about people's whose lives look different than ours is different than what it was 15 years ago even. And so
Yeah.
are coming on board, and so there is like a learning period, and we're constantly learning, right? But like, there is a learning period of kind of recognizing, when you are engaging with grassroots organizations, what is your role? What are the things that are helpful versus the things that are not helpful? And I was lucky to have learned those things when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, not when I'm, in my 30s or 40s. Like, yes, it is
Yes.
like, I'm looking at these things and I'm like, fuck, I learned that when I was 18. But if you're experiencing that same learning period and you are just doing it at a different age, it doesn't change the fact that you still need to learn those things.
Right. And I think like ultimately, this person that I very sarcastically told that story about, like, Did they show up and donate supplies? Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And that, like, the action, the thing that they set out to do is something that they did, which is great. Um, and I doubt that they're going to watch this like live stream just because they have very purposeful, like, it's weird, like we're both like radical heathens who are like doing work, but we don't like each other clearly. um
But I think there's also like, I appreciate that you're addressing and also not being like this person, blah, 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 because I also don't think that that's particularly helpful either, right? When it's like you don't need to be
no.
signal boosting somebody who you're like, I things that they're doing are cool. And also you don't need to be like publicly ripping them to shreds when it's like, okay, we have
No.
disagreements in the way that we like go about things. And that's just a fact. And so like, I don't need to give like, extra breath or light to them. And also I don't need to be like, engaging in the alternative, which also we see a lot in activism circles, which is like toxic takedown, like verging on cancel culture in the way that cancel culture has become very toxic, and where it's like punching down or punching laterally rather than like calling in and trying to bring attention to the folks that can shift, and otherwise punching up to the folks that don't give a fuck.
Right. I mean, I think it's ultimately like, there's the intentions and actions, right? Or the intentions and results.
Yes.
um and as long as you actually did more good than,
Yes.
like, if you show up, take a selfie and leave without actually distributing anything, like, that's a fucking problem, and I hate that. If you show up, take a selfie, take a TikTok, and also participate, like, I don't know, they're just layers there anyway. Like, I don't know how we
uh,
even got started talking about this, but I'm glad we did.
but I think that it's like, it's also an interesting, like bringing it back to the concept of sanctuary. Sanctuary in community is exponentially trickier, I think, which is also why I think, like, I mean, when I've been working on this project, it's very much centered on like sanctuary building around yourself, and then building around your dear ones, building around like small, tight community. But like for me, the ultimate goal with self care is like self care in in service of ultimately community care. Like we can be of better service for one another when we have well resourced ourselves, and when we have made a point of making sure that our needs are met, so that we can then
Yes.
the healthiest version of ourselves, so that we are not like coming into community in a dysregulated way and causing more harm intentionally or unintentionally. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
but it is totally, like tricky to build sanctuary in community when we have different opinions and when we're coming at it differently. And I mean, I think that it does ultimately come down to, we're not all going to agree ever, but how can we get to a point where we are able to come together with our differences and have a conversation in a not like in a regulated way, rather than in the dysregulated way that, I mean, definitely COVID has made it worse. I think the, lack of interaction with one another. I was having a conversation, I think I was with Grace, um, a couple of days ago, where, yeah, it was when we were doing the live, but we were talking about how like hearts beating and like human hearts, they regulate with one another. They will beat in tandem with
Mm.
and connect, but you need to be within a 2 meter distance in order for your hearts to be able to do that. And so COVID, for very good reasons, has very much forced us to be apart. And that has also stopped our hearts from regulating with one another. And there's, like, there's an analogy there. I think there's also like a very practical factor there of, it is harder. And I mean, we saw it with Twitter when Twitter first came out, and I think Instagram is starting to get that way. In like, it's different, or it's interesting to see like how things shift over time as they have more opportunity to get toxic. But like we
Yeah.
saw Twitter go really toxic really fast because people were not looking at each other's faces and they were not connecting. And it was also with the most restrictive captions and the most restrictive way of interacting with one another, where you're literally talking in these little bite-sized things and there's no ability to get into the nuance. And it's highly problematic. And then you add the algorithms on top of that, where the whole point of the algorithms is to they want that dysregulation, they want the rage, they want the anger, because it's what gets people staying on the platforms. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like so fucking unhealthy. And I do think that there needs to be more responsibility taken by the platforms for, like, if you are going to be existing, then you do actually, you have a role, and there's things that you can do to make people less garbagey.
Yes.
Like, this
Yes.
platforms, and what can we do to make them less garbagey, and for us to figure out how again to be in better relation with one another.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being in better relation, it's been wild because with the pandemic, I have both loved, in terms, like I've gotten much more involved on Discord. I have a Discord for my Patreon, which is really great. And I'm in some other Discord spaces that are really lovely. Um, and also, like, I just really want to be in person. I want to go to an event,
And
like, I
yeah,
want to go to an event and not be worried. And like, I miss the art scene. Like, I miss like a lot of those things. Even, like, not like, I allow myself to go to coffee shops now and I mask up the whole time that I'm inside and stuff. But like, even just going to a coffee shop, and everything feels so fraught, when you are still, like me, um, managing the pandemic and not wanting to get sick. I live with several very immunocompromised people that I do not want to get sick. I'm also immunocompromised. Um, and so it just feels like every time you leave your house, it's like, oh my God, this like horrible like weight that wasn't there before. And I mean, even the other day, my spouse and I were like talking about this one date that we went on where we just like met up at a coffee shop and walked around the lake. That is absolutely something that we could still do,
right.
with COVID, but we felt so much lighter.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like you're not thinking about, I mean, even like I mean, Minneapolis is similar to Winnipeg in terms of having very extreme weather, and our winters are shit. And everybody,
Yeah.
and then you have this like brief summer that is so beautiful, and everybody literally comes out of their shells, um, in terms of their houses, and interacts with one another, and you try to basically shove like a year's worth of socializing into a few short, because you know that you're all going to go and hide away again in the winter. And it's so wonderful and also so exhausting and overwhelming these days, because we can't just hang out and chill and feel super cozy about it. And there are definitely people who do. And part of me is envious of having that like really chill, like, you know, attitude around it. And also, I'm like, it's not how I function. Like, I am going to be thinking about, my parents who are older and have various, um, things that put them at higher risk. And I am going to think about, my friends and the folks that I interact with. And I'm also going to think about myself and think, like, I don't fucking want long COVID. I don't, like, we don't know
No.
what this does long term. We know that it impacts the entire body and has the ability to impact the entire body. And I'm not really interested in seeing what that might do for me, nor am I interested in seeing, how might it affect, the kids that I interact with whose bodies are still building up immune systems and or immune systems. And it's like, yeah, I think it comes back to that idea of like sanctuary and mutual aid being like very much intertwined with one another, and where
Yeah.
like humans can be inherently selfish. Like, honestly, kids are super fucking selfish, and we have to teach not be, right? Like you have to teach kids to be kind and generous and to share and all those things. But they also quite naturally, in most cases, unless you've got a sociopath, um, they also very naturally gravitate towards being kind and generous. And when kids learn to truly hate, then that's a learned behavior as well. It's not a natural thing. They might notice differences and make a point of pointing out differences, but hatred as part of that is very much a taught behavior by adults around them, and that's not. So it's this thing, humans might start off selfish. We've evolved to be very communal creatures. And so how do we, support our community, both immediately around us and then also on the wider scale?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just realized that we have been talking for an hour and a half, which I'm not surprised about because this is totally what we did. I do appreciate that I think there's some folks that have been like watching for basically the whole time. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, I'm very impressed actually. If there are people who've been sticking around for a while, I'm very impressed. But I am hungry.
Yes, so I die pots. Thank you for doing this. Where can people be finding you? Obviously, where can they be pre-ordering your upcoming book / where would you like them to be pre-ordering? What's like the best situation for you? What's all that stuff?
Pre-order the book literally where you buy books, anywhere. So that could be your local indie bookstore. I love it when people pre-order from indie bookstores because it encourages the bookstore to just like have it on their shelves, even if they're not necessarily a witchy place.
Yeah.
Anywhere you buy witchcraft supplies, I'm assuming they will also sell books there, so you can request it from your library. I have a link in my bio, so you can go and like pre-order it from IndieBound, with whatever like local bookstore you want to support and buy it there. But yeah, anywhere that's convenient for you, anywhere that you buy books. My Instagram handle, you can see it because we're here in this space together, is siri.vincent.plouff. Go follow me there for more updates. And I also, my other big thing other than the book is the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm currently in the process of relaunching that. I'm changing some things about the podcast, so I'm relaunching it. But you can find it. I stream through Anchor. So Spotify is probably the easiest place to find it, but I am also on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, just go ahead and listen to the back catalog. There's, I think, like 30 episodes or something like that. I'm not totally sure.
Good. Very good for like summer binging on road trips and stuff.
Yes, definitely.
This has been
yes.
So definitely going to everybody grabs copies of or pre-order copies of your book. It is very much aligned with all of the themes of Sanctuary and the book that I am working on right now. You can join the Sanctuary Hub via the link in my bio or just going straight to ashalberg.com/sanctuary. And we are going to be doing a live round of the Creative Coven Challenge. So if you need to like get your creative mojo back up and running, this is a great opportunity to do it. It's structured for knitters, but absolutely really anybody can use the exercises and basically apply the concept of swatching, which is for knitters making just a little bit of knitting, but you can apply to whatever your creative practice is, whether you crochet, you weave, you draw, you paint, you write. You can totally be applying the exercises to whatever your creative practice is. And yeah, we're going to get started with that live round on Monday. So you've got a couple of days to join us live, and then we'll be checking in for the live round Monday, Wednesday, Friday of next week. But you also retain access to all of your resources 24/7. There is a custom fit knee-high sock class in there, which I am personally super stoked about. So if that is of Definitely check it out. It's a fun little formula that came as a result of trying to write a formula recipe that would work well for everybody in the book and realizing that it's a little more complicated. So I just made a class of it instead and stuck it into the sanctuary book. So, folks, you can find that again at ashalberg.com/sanctuary. And we will be back here tomorrow for another sanctuary chat with my good friend, Patty Ryan Lee, who is the tech witch. And she approaches witchcraft through technology and is basically my personal Google and help desk as well, which I really appreciate. So we'll be back here tomorrow, same time. And if you are watching the replay, thank you. And also thanks for tuning in for this long because you and I can talk forever.
Yeah, we're very well suited to like, oh, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing. Yeah. So thank you all for watching the replay. For those of you who have stuck around for this whole conversation, I so appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to getting to know hopefully some new followers.
Okay, thanks everyone. Chat soon.
Bye.
Bye.